in 9.5 minutes. What is the Christian faith from a scientific point of view? My name is Adrian Lowe, and I want to tell you about a 2,000-year-old faith, wonderfully diverse, with currently the largest following in the world, and it is still growing. It begins with the creation, 13,800 million years ago, at the Big Bang, when space-time was seeding the universe. An initial overwhelming bundle of energy, maybe even smaller than a jam jar, was the beginning of God's great plan of creation, a design that would eventually lead to a cosmos full of dust, condensing into galaxies of stars, many of which then explode to generate new stars and planets from their stardust, dust from which we are made. The numbers are huge. Our planet is one of maybe 8 with 22 zeros after it. So since the Big Bang, nearly 200,000 planets on average have been created every second, and that blows my mind. Christians believe that this earth is part of that vast eternal plan of God, given it is formed with an optimal combination of key elements such as excellent atmosphere, surface water, distance from the quality sun, a wonderful magnetic field, orbit and rotation periods, with a meteorite-catching moon and minimal tectonic activity. This is simply the best planet we know that can support conscious sentient life. And because of these incredible harmonies, Earth has been able to experience 3.5 billion years of evolution, gently guided by God through the apparent randomness built into the fabric of the universe. This vast space randomness of the quantum world has been revealed over the last century, particularly by such famous names as Einstein, Schrödinger and Heisenberg. It provides a possible how God has influenced and guided evolution through its fantastic journey. And why wouldn't God use that if he created it? We now know uncertainty and unpredictability are features of the smallest and largest in creation. We know that in the deepest vacuum of space there is constant activity, 0-point energy, and we know quantum entanglement means that much of what we are made is connected far beyond any human's horizon. And with more than 80 billion neurons in our brains, each with a hair trigger, then our thinking cannot help but be influenced by the randomness in which just maybe God has a hand. And trying to explain consciousness, a self-sacrificial love, art, music and much more without reference to a loving God is all too smug. Indeed, thinking that we are in the pinnacle of intelligence in our universe is just statistical folly. The Bible starts with, in the beginning God created, and that is a key belief in the Christian faith. But so is the belief that God influences the direction creation is taking. And it also tells us the story of how humankind has begun to understand the mind behind creation, how we've come to recognize God and discover God's nature being unconditional love. This wasn't easy because early images of God were of a being full of hate, selective in love, and some primitive Bible stories even have God rejecting much of the world, being a destroyer of nations, punishing the innocent, or even just a playful God toying with our lives. At worst, God has no interest in anyone who did not exactly follow an impossibly large set of rules, and the only option for atonement then was animal sacrifice. This God seemed focused on death and destruction for those who failed. These dreadful images of God are totally overturned when Jeshua, we know him as Jesus, the son of a girl called Mary, is born in Palestine. He lives a mostly unrecorded life until he is 30, and then begins 3 years of teaching and miraculous healing ministry, which proved to be a turning point in the timeline of humanity. Jesus' ministry was completely different from any other prophetic ministries before or after. His words, actions and love were so powerful that crowds followed him everywhere. He changed lives for good. He healed where local medics failed. The Gospel records his raising the dead to life, and these records come with both location and identification, so that at the time skeptics could go and visit and check for themselves. God in Jesus was reaching out to humanity. God in Jesus welcomed the outcast, the broken, and those with spiritual, mental and physical disabilities, and despite his popularity, he refused to raise an army, to be made a king, or to accrue wealth, or take on a political role. His followers instead discovered in him new strength, lasting comfort, support, unconditional love, abundant life, freedom, hope, joy, truth, and a peace that the world can't give. This is his kingdom of love. Time and again he was identified as having the mind, the nature, the spirit and the power of God, and as the ancient text predicted, God in human form had come to visit. He did not want to overthrow the entire culture and religion of the Israelites, but to update it, to ensure that living and loving one's neighbour was at the top of the human agenda. But his fame was costly for him. He knew it would be. The powerful, the oligarchs, the kingmakers and temple leaders arrested him, and with a biased trial executed him by nailing him to a cross. Humankind had apparently ridded themselves of God, but this was not the last word. 3 days later he was alive again, meeting more than 500 and preparing his followers for the millennia to come by helping them to engage with God by recognizing the diverse and amazing connections that can make life more abundant, because it is so much better living in harmony with the Creator God, who is love. Of course, human history proves we do make a mess of life. We sin. We ignore the teachings of Jesus. We create vast divides between the poor and the wealthy in our society. We wage wars that devastate lives and nations, and sometimes we create lasting grief. This was the risk that God in love took when he evolved in us consciousness and free will. We are not simply programmed robots operating according to a set of instructions, but free will gives us choice. We can love our neighbour or flatten anyone who gets in our way, and then, guilty, we can hide ourselves away from God, just like Adam the apple eater did. But God says, stop. You don't need to be like this. Pause and listen. Be open to change. I can unclutter, enable whatever's needed to do differently, and I can forgive. The alternative is a hell on earth and a permanent personal hell, when in full view of the damage that you have done, you are faced with the mighty God of love. Then there is something beautiful about being back in love, in harmony, holding hands that will never let go, even through death and beyond. That is our faith, the Christian faith. As Jesus said to the condemned man on the cross next to him, "Today I will see you in paradise." It's good to know that there is nothing can ever separate us from this love. Thank you for listening.